Hello again. As you know, I am Eli, the computer guy, and we are doing yet another Coffee with Geeks. So I have Brad Wilson here, president of Geist. We're going to be talking about PDUs today, power distribution units. Basically, they go into data centers, and essentially, I guess, are power strips on steroids. I guess is what I would say. So thank you for being here.
You bet. Thanks for having me.
Yep. Okay. So I always ask this with everybody that comes on. The first thing is their title. So when you're president of Geist, what does that actually mean to people?
So I'm in charge of what Geist is for us. We have two manufacturing facilities, one in Lincoln, Nebraska, one in Taunton in the UK, which is in the southwestern UK. We have sales guys all over the United States. We have another sales office in London and a sales office in Shenzhen, China. And we have a DCIM, a data center infrastructure management software group that's out in Fort Collins. And we have a nest of geeks down in Austin, Texas that design circuit boards and the firmware that goes on those circuit boards that make the smarts of our product work. So I'm in charge of all of that.
You're in charge of it. How did you wind up in that position? How long have you been in the tech world?
This was kind of I don't know, I guess I'm a historian as much as anything. I started with one of the parent company of Geist owns three plastic companies. I started with one of them in 1992, was there for 3 years, a different one for 3 years. I came into Geist, and Geist was initially a plastics company, invented a little piece of plastic that runs across the floor, and people used to hide telephone cords under it and things like that. You've probably seen it, a little duct runs across the floor. So that was invented in 1948. So I came in here on the plastic side in 98 when, the internet wasn't really what we think of the internet now. It was, people were using 15 amp, 120 volt power strips. Most of the stuff we did in those days was more referred to as telco than it was data center. And so I kind of moved over to the power side in about 2000. And so in the last 16 years, the industry has changed, and we've just tried to keep up with it. So I've been in operations, I've been in engineering, I've been in upper management, and so I just outlasted everybody.
I guess that's the way to be successful. So, but you didn't start off as like a technology professional then. You were in plastics and then just kind of wound up here as your career got you there.
Exactly. Much more. I'm technical aptitude, but I started off more as an operations guy. I was really about, how do we build things and build them more efficiently? How do we ramp up production, and how do we take different skill sets and add them into our product? And so over that course of time, I've, learned this industry and got more familiar with the technology side. But my background is more operations, and my degree's in agriculture.
Oh, really? There you go. Cool. So then so Geist was the plastics company. So then how did it wind up as a PDU company? How did this wind up as a major profit center for you?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. That floor duct that I was talking about that runs across the floor was kind of sold into office products markets. Yeah. And from that, we got into some of the what you think of as a power strip, a plastic power strip that sits underneath your desk with 6 outlets on it. So we were making those in the United States, well beyond when all the rest of the market had gone to Asia for those. And we were kind of the sole supplier to the government for a while because we were the only ones still made in the United States. And that kind of led into, a few of these customers from duct and from these other things started asking us if we could build power strips in metal boxes, 1U mounted power strips. And so we had a few customers back in the early days, and one sales guy that really saw the potential in this from the standpoint of marketing into telcos, again, in that day and age. And so we started into it with the 15 amp stuff. People started asking for more power, so we made 20 amp stuff, and then 30 amp stuff, and then it came to 3-phase, and then people wanted smart power. And so we just kind of kept growing and adding as the market demanded. But we maintained the manufacturing base here in Lincoln. And so, I think that's one of the keys to our success is that we've always kept it close, and everybody's in the same building. So we're fast to respond, and I may have answered about 3 questions there.
Yeah, you did. I guess that's one of the questions is so you're doing it in the US, but I thought common knowledge was that you couldn't manufacture anything in the US. Like
Well,
how is that actually profitable for you folks?
that's one of the things where we've defied common knowledge, and I think we've proven that knowledge wrong.
Hmm.
We've taken every opportunity we can to vertically integrate as we go. So, when we started out, we bought everything, including the metal box that it goes in. We didn't have the ability to build the technology and so on. So as we grew, we vertically integrated. So we partnered with a company called IT Watchdogs back in about 2004, 2005. We eventually bought that company, and that's the group of that. The remainder of that group is the group in Austin, Texas, that designs all our circuit boards. So we design in house. We wanted to build a customized product fast for people, but we were relying on outside sources to make the metal box that things go in. Yeah. So we added, at the cost of about $2.5 million, metalworking capabilities. So we can take a flat sheet of steel, punch out the shape we want, fold it up, run it through a powder coating booth, and we can make a metal chassis for this thing within a day. So we've done all these things over time to integrate, vertically integrate, and become efficient. And so when everybody else is worried about labor costs, our labor costs are low because we've made a product that's easy to build, because we're here to support the build. A lot of people, I think, underestimate the amount of time and effort it goes into trying to support building a product a half a world away in a time zone that's 12 hours off of yours. So what people end up doing is they have 10 SKUs. Go to our competitors. They've got 15, 20 different products that they want to try and sell you, and they'll make a boatload of those and ship them over here.
Yeah.
We can make 1, 2, 3, 5, however many you need on demand. And that's another thing that we do. We don't sit on inventory of finished products. We build on demand, we ship on demand. So a lot of people think that's not a viable model either, but we figured out a way to do that through lean manufacturing, to do it in 3 to 5 days. So we don't have finished goods sitting in our warehouse, but we can get you the product you need when you need it. And so that's made us a viable US-based manufacturing company, and we're very proud of that. So
that's interesting. I mean, do you think that's very replicatable in this modern world? Is it just a quirk of you do PDUs and that's a special type of business, or do you think other manufacturing businesses could duplicate what you're doing?
I think other manufacturing business could duplicate it, but it's not a switch you turn on. You know what I mean? You work at it and work at it for years and years and years, and you're never done. Yeah. Geist is all about continuous improvement, and that every day we talk about that. What are we going to do to make ourselves better? What's the next, you're always looking for that next piece of low hanging fruit. And sometimes you're reaching pretty high for that anymore, but you're always looking for that next thing that sets you apart, makes you better, and makes you more responsive.
And then I guess one of the things is, since you brought up the manufacturing, is there's a whole argument that I guess Americans don't want these types of jobs. Like what do your employees do that assemble the PDUs? Like what's their job like? What's their education like?
I would say you're mostly the floor, the assembly floor is mostly high school education. It's a mix of backgrounds. Then there's a lot of support from, we have, maybe there's a half a dozen technicians, and then you get into the engineering, and we've got dozens of engineers that support all this. So the key is to make it so that so that the job is repeatable, right? That it's not, we strive to make a very nice working environment. So we moved into the factory we're in right now about 13 months ago. And if you walk through this place, this is not what you would think of if you think of an Asian sweatshop, right? We've got 18-foot high ceilings, really good light, air conditioned, the latest and greatest in terms of tools to make our product. And we have, nice assembly flow cells so that the product flows through easily. People are, I think, motivated to come to work. They like working here. We have a very low turnover on our assembly floor. So again, I think we're doing a good job there of keeping people happy and creating a work environment that's conducive to coming to work.
Yeah. Oh, that's interesting. So then with the PDUs, then how do you end up, like, what's the process for actually designing these? Because again, like normally you think of a PDU and it's just a power strip, but you've got intelligent ones and managed ones, and you can do a lot of kind of fancy stuff with it. So what's the process for figuring out what products people actually want and then actually designing them?
Well, good question. I guess we always have our ear to the ground. We're listening to what people say. As I stated earlier, we have developed a family of products over time. So what started as just basic strips, the first thing that kind of came to mind when people were asking for was, we'd like to know how much power is being consumed. So first that was a local meter, and then it became, well, how can I get this data out of it? Is there a way to get it out through serial or through Ethernet or whatever? So we added Ethernet monitoring. That capability then became, how much information do people want? Or is there a way to scale that information? At one point it was just, I need to know how much power, how much current is being drawn, so I'm not going to trip a circuit breaker upstream. Yeah. So you start off with just current monitoring. And then maybe it's like, well, I want to know how much power is being consumed altogether. Data centers a few years ago went from mentality of watts per square foot to kilowatts per cabinet. So am I drawing 2 kilowatts in a cabinet, 10 kilowatts in a cabinet? Now we're seeing people consistently pushing, 15 kilowatts in a cabinet. So this is a lot of power. So those kind of things go into your design. You're designing a technology to monitor the power, but then you're figuring out, okay, how many circuit breakers do I need? How many circuits do I need within this that allow me to pull 15 kilowatts through a cabinet? So that's going to be, instead of a 15 amp, 120 volt plug like I've got on the wall in my house, now I've got a 60 amp 3-phase plug that's this big around, this long, and it just draws an immense amount of power. So all of these elements go into the design and into figuring out what's going to work. And then the next thing is, I want all of that, but I want it this big, because nobody wants to give up space in the back. They want free airflow for the servers. So you're constantly challenged with finding the right components that fit the need, but make it small, make it compact, but still make it easy to build and easy to use. So it's a process, but it's one, I guess, that we've developed over time.
That's interesting. So how often do like new classes of PDUs come out? Is this like a car where every year there's a newer, better one, or every 5 years, or just when it happens?
I say you probably, a 5-year lifespan on technology is probably, reasonable, 5 to 7. So you're taking, what we're looking at right now, we're developing a much more modular approach. So over time, we've developed, this board does this, and this board does this, and these kind of get siloed. So we're working on now is a much more modular approach where one front end board may be able to talk to a lot of different types of boards behind it. So one interface will become a front end for just power monitoring, or it could be the front end for environmental monitoring, or power plus environmental, power plus outlet. We do a lot of outlet control, outlet switching, outlet monitoring, and that sort of thing. So we can remotely go in and reboot a server without ever talking to the server, just by turning the power off and back on. So all these different technology layers can build and become part of one bus or one system.
Well, that's interesting. So then how do people figure out, like if they're interested in this and there's all these options, how do people figure out what you actually have available? Because you're talking about environmental sensors and being able to do individual plugs. Like, do you have like sales associates that they contact, or do they just sit there with a big old check things off? Like,
it kind of depends on what people want to do. We've got inside salespeople that can walk through a list of questions with people. We have kind of a sheet that kind of takes them through a list of questions. How much power do you need? What kind of information do you want? That sort of thing. They can go on the website and they can explore the different options that we have. maybe hone in on it that way. It kind of depends on how people are geared. Some people want to do all the research on the web, right? Some people want to talk to somebody and have them talk through it. Some people look to their peers and say, what are you using? How are you using it? What do I need to do? So I think there's any number of ways that you can get from point A to point B. It's kind of dependent on your wants and desires. But we also have the regional managers. They can come in, directly come in and talk to somebody, talk through what their needs are. So any number of ways, from live to completely web research.
That's cool. So, I mean, for people that are interested in power for these data centers, are there certificates or there education programs? Because like with a lot of IT people, I mean, you're dealing with, routing protocols. Like,
Sure.
seems like the power is one of those things that you deal with once or twice, but it's not necessarily something you're thinking about every day. And I could imagine making a very expensive mistake if I wasn't, I forgot something.
Right. There are some data center certification courses out there, but what you find, the power strip really ends up sometimes in this no man's land. You've got facilities people that are responsible for the power coming into the building, converting it down from a medium voltage to a high voltage to a low voltage, and they supply it to something near the cabinet. And then you've got IT guys that are filling the cabinet with servers and plugging those servers into the power strip. So that where that handshake is, whether it is the IT guy's responsibility or facilities guy's responsibility, depends on the data center, depends on a number of factors. We've seen that shift, I think, in the last 5 to 7 years, more and more towards the IT side of the house, because the IT guys are the guys that have to decide how many outlets do I need, how much power am I going to consume. They see that from the servers that they're going to try to build into the cabinet. So, and again, that becomes a little bit outside of the comfort zone of some of the IT guys. They tend, they're more about the server and the application than they are about the power and the consumption. So we try to do a lot to help educate people, bring them, again, give them the information they need, find out how we can help them, what's available for power, what they actually need, what the outlet configuration is going to be. So hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then, so your big thing now is the custom PDUs. And so what can they actually customize? Because I mean, I think about it, and you were talking about your competitors have 10 or 15 SKUs or whatever. And I would think that would be it. I would think you would come up with about 20 products and just they would pick and you would build it. Like, what are they actually customizing when they get a custom PDU from you?
A lot of times it's the outlet configuration that they have. I need this many C13 outlets for 1U servers. I need this many C19s for blade servers, or for bigger networking gear. Some people want to try to get a mix of all of it. You have physical constraints now, so if you've got a 30-inch wide cabinet, you've probably got a fair amount of room, but data centers are expensive, so people try to fit everything in a 24-inch cabinet, which means now I have less space for PDUs. I can't block airflow, so we may do a physical design that's different than a straight, what you would think of as a PDU, to try and fit into unused space or dead space within a cabinet. Because we can punch the metal right here and so on, we can be very flexible with what that physical design looks like. So instead of being, kind of typical 2-inch by 2-inch profile, maybe it becomes 5 inches wide and breakers on one side and receptacles are on another. We can be very flexible with how that looks. And we're talking about devices that now people are building. It used to be 42U cabinets, 42 servers in a cabinet. Now we're at 48, 52, 54 in some places. The size of these things becomes very, it becomes limiting, it's like how much stuff can I get on there in the space I have. So there's a lot of ability to kind of customize around that, what the power requirement is, one of the things is even how we do the outlets. You used to think if we had a 3-phase unit, that had 3 circuits within a power strip, we'd have outlets A, outlets B, and outlets C. And now to help balance that load across all the phases, we may do, again, it's just a little example here, but we have phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, so we can constantly alternate those phases, so that as I build a cabinet from the bottom up, I'm balancing those loads so that I get an equal load on A, an equal load on B, and an equal load on C. And you go into a data center, some cabinets have 10 servers in them, some have 20, some have 30, some have all 42. So if I can balance that load as I stack up, then I will balance the load across the whole data center much more easily.
Yeah, that's impressive.
And that requires some unique wiring internally, some processes that we've developed that allow us to do all of that. What is essentially complex wiring, but to do it in a very simple and straightforward way that's very robust.
Yeah. Huh, that's cool.
The big thing, one of the big things here, you're always trying to build in reliability. It's one of the key attributes of anything going into a data center is reliability.
Yeah. How do you test the equipment? Does everything actually get tested before it gets shipped, or?
Yeah, we have a group that writes our test code. It's a whole internal, program that we've written, which I think at last count was somewhere over 300,000 lines of code that goes in, and we would go into a unit. So we'll have a work order for the unit. It'll have a barcode on it that says the unit. That barcode will actually key what software gets plugged into the unit. It'll tell people plug in this load to these outlets, these load into these outlets. So on the assembly line at that last station, every unit gets plugged in, runs through a fully automatic test that tests the load to make sure that things are wired the way they're supposed to be, that we haven't switched phases anywhere, haven't crossed wires. Everything is tested. All of that's recorded into a database. Test reports printed out, goes with the unit. It's tied to the serial number, tied to the MAC address. So if you have a question about a unit, you call us up and give us a serial number or MAC address. We can tell you when it was made, who tested it, give you the full test report on it, all the data that we gathered. We can repeat the test. So everything is very, very much repeatable, very much automated to the point where, again, those assembly workers on the line can perform a very robust test process with a minimum of experience.
That's pretty good. And then, so when people are ordering the custom PDUs, do they have to order a certain amount of them? Is it like a dozen of a certain type, or can they just order one? Or
we like to try to push people to a minimums of about 30 pieces.
30, okay.
That which is low for our industry. A lot of our people in our industry are 100 to 200 piece minimums and 12 to 14 weeks. We're 30 pieces, 2 to 3 weeks.
Oh, okay.
So
I thought it was 5 days. I got confused.
So standard product 3 to 5 days. If we're doing a custom product first time through, so we've got to design metal, punch it out, build a sample, and then get that out. So we'll usually do in 2 to 3 weeks for that. Now we've done it faster. We've done it in as fast as 3 days for people before. But,
wow.
The right customer calls up.
Yeah, the right checkbook type of thing. Okay, that makes sense. So then, other than like the phases and power and the outlet types, what other things, like what functionality can you get custom into a PDU? So you can reset an individual power outlet. Like what else do you have in there?
Well, so the technology kind of starts. I guess we say there's basic metering, which is just going to be a local display. Mm-hmm. The next level up, you're going to be able to get full power information remotely through Ethernet. The next level up from that, we would add environmental monitoring capability to it, so you can add temperature sensors, humidity sensors, things like that.
That's actually built into the PDU itself, or?
Well, what we do now is they're generally external. We had a PDU where they were built in, but generally what you're trying to do is find out what's the temperature at the back of the cabinet, the hottest spot. Where's my pain point, really, right? So the temperature sensors or humidity sensors being tethered to the unit made more sense, because we can we can measure where we want to measure. Yeah. Some people will measure the front of the cabinet so they know what the air temperature is coming in, and then 2 to 3 spots on the input, and then maybe one on exhaust. Input temperature can vary a lot just between the floor and the ceiling, or the bottom and the top of the cabinet, based on wraparound heat, um, inefficient floor tile placement, things like that. So there's a lot of option there to do the environmental monitoring. And then when we get to the kind of going from there, then with power monitoring, you'll do input power, so you'll get volts, amps, watts, power factor, those kind of things on your input power. But then if the unit has 3 circuits internally or 6 circuits internally, that means 3 or 6 circuit breakers, which we may be monitoring those as well. So if we know a circuit breaker can trip at 20 amps, I can send you an alarm, at any predetermined threshold.
Okay.
Typically, your alarms are only at about 40% of your threshold, because you've got an A feed and a B feed. And if I'm at 40% on A and 40% on B, and I fail over, now I'm at 80% one, right? So,
Okay.
so thresholds end up being a lot lower than you would expect when you think of a 20 amp circuit. So we can set all those thresholds. Those alerts can go out through email or through SNMP traps.
Okay.
And then we step up to the outlet level stuff, where we can do outlet level switching, which is the reboot, server reboot. We can do outlet level monitoring. So if you want to go in and monitor one server versus another server to kind of say, well, this server is inefficient, or this application uses a lot of energy, or, oh, I see that every day at 5 o'clock, this server ramps up and uses a lot of energy and then ramps down. Why is that? Well, that's the accounting function that runs at the end of the day, or something like that. So you can kind of watch all that from a power consumption standpoint. So there's, some people out there that want that level of granularity in data, and we can provide it. Most people don't use that granular data, but when they do, they love it. If you're a geek all the way, I guess.
There you go. So then, I mean, if you're thinking about one, that seems easy to manage. But if you're talking about 30 or 100 of these PDUs, do you offer a piece of software that allows you to see all of this, or does it go to some kind of SNMP thing, or how do you actually manage that many PDUs? Yeah.
There's different layers of that. First of all, we have a utility software called Device Director. And what Device Director does is it'll go in, if we've got 100 units in your data center, it'll auto-discover those if they're all on one subnet. It'll auto-discover all of them, bring them up. Then if we have a firmware release and you want to go update the firmware and all of them, it'll go and automatically update the firmware and all of them. If you want to do some mass alarm threshold settings, so you want to say, I've got one temperature sensor on every one of these, and I'm going to set all the temperature thresholds at 72 degrees. You can set them all at once instead of going to each individual unit.
Okay.
Mass threshold. So it's really a big utility, kind of a utility program. That's a free program that we give away. The next layer up from there becomes, you're starting to get into data center infrastructure management. So there's, we have a software that we use mostly for white space, mostly for SNMP managed devices. So it's very good with our devices. Anything else that has SNMP protocols, we can integrate into it. That's kind of, first level in terms of cost. And then we have a higher DSIM package that will talk multiple protocols, multiple language. So not just SNMP, but Modbus, BACnet, LAN, the more traditional facility type languages are some of the older type languages. So that product then, really, we think of anything in the facility. So if we want to tie into a building management system, we can pull in that information. If we want to pull in information from generators and gen sets, from chillers, from air conditioners, cracks, crays, any of that kind of stuff, we can pull all that information in and give you that single pane of glass, one screen that you're looking at. Allows you to look at all your data centers and then drill down into a specific data center, drill down into a specific data hall, down into the rack, whatever level you want to be able to drill down into. And that's what's done out in our Fort Collins facility. So.
Okay, that's pretty cool. And then, so what is your normal, what's your average client look like? So if my viewers and my people, wherever they're at, I mean, is it 100 cabinets, 1,000 cabinets, 2 cabinets? What is your average customer?
That's a good question. Our IT watchdogs acquisition back in 2006. Those guys, they were environmental monitoring products for guys that, guys not unlike the IT team here at Geist. That we've got one cabinet in there. It's running our email server. It's running our ERP or MRP system, right? But they don't have any way to know that the air conditioner failed on the weekend, so they buy an environmental monitoring unit from us, or maybe one power strip. So there's the one cabinet guys, and then on the other end of the scale, I'm providing to the hyperscale cloud guys that are building data centers, 30 megawatts at a time, 5 different places in the world at once. Yeah. So I span the gamut between one cabinet and guys that are buying 15 to 20,000 cabinets a year.
Jesus. Okay. And so how would somebody go about buying PDUs if they were interested in these?
So call us directly. When you call in, you're going to get somebody, based on the area code you dial from, you'll get the person that has that area in our inside sales team. They can help you understand who's available locally to buy them from. So we sell through distribution networks. Okay. So, big facilities distributors, also through more local system integrators, value-added resellers, things like that. So depending on where you're at and what world you live in, we probably have somebody that's close to you, somebody you've dealt with before, already have an account with, that you can buy from. The environmental monitoring only products are sold on our website. There is a credit card, ability to buy those with credit card. But anytime we get into power and the power stuff, we stick with the distribution channels. We've built a strong relationship with them. So that's our main means of sale there. Wow. But we can find somebody close to you that can help you out.
So if anybody here is a consultant or basically, has clients, do you have a partnership program? Is there a way for them to become a distributor or be able to sell your products directly?
Yes.
Okay. Yes.
I don't know if I can give you all the details of that, but yeah, the short answer is yes. We welcome the opportunity to talk to people. And again, what we find is the closer somebody is to a client or to a client set, the better they're going to be to represent our product. They've got that trusted relationship. They're close to the end user. They can help explain why it's useful. And so those are going to be good resellers for us.
Okay. And then with the PDUs, what's the approximate price range of these things? Is it $20 to $100, $500 to $2,000? Where are you looking at the prices?
Your bottom end, if you're 15 amp, 6, 8, 10 outlet, 1U, 120 volt devices, that's the bottom, a very basic PDU. Those are probably a $50 to $60 to $80 device, right?
Okay. Yeah.
And again, we're talking a steel construction, very robust. It's not something you pick up at Walmart. If I go to the high end, if I'm talking, outlet level switch to outlet level monitored, the very Cadillac type feature set, you're going to be, list prices into $2,000, $2,200 for 24 outlets. So, you're getting into $80 to $100 per outlet when you get to that control level. Wow. So, and it's everything in between. The sweet spot for a lot of people is input power monitor, where they want to know how much power is coming in, how much power is being consumed in a cabinet or in a rack. And so in any data center, I would just say that's probably the sweet spot in terms of volume for us, is that level of input power monitoring. And that, those tend to go 30 amp single phase up to maybe 60 amp 3-phase and be $300 to $700.
Okay. That's not too bad. So, and then if people are talking with their clients or their bosses about this, and so if you look at whoever your competitors are in PDUs, like, what do you think your competitive advantage is? Like, if I'm going to buy one of these things, like, why? Is it quality? Is it the price? Is it just because you're American? Like, what is the actual competitive advantage?
Well, I'll always argue that being the American-made guy on the block is the best one out there. And I can, any of our competitors, there's competitors we have that have a U.S. presence, and maybe even their headquarters in the U.S., but most of their manufacturing is done in India, in China, in Taiwan. I challenge you to go to any one of those factories and then come to ours and see a truck pull up with a truckload of steel and see a power strip come out the other end of the place, because nobody does it but us. Aside from that, like I said, reliability is one of the keys to this industry, and we make a reliable product and we'll put it up against anybody's. We'll show you how we build it and how we make the connections inside that make it reliable. We run everything through, pretty extensive DVT testing. We have in-house UL labs, in-house reliability engineers. So we do a lot of shake and bake and make sure that stuff works and works long-term. So reliability, data center, that's number one concern. I'd say another thing is the lead time. Again, we're not pulling something off the shelf for you, but most people in this industry are expecting a product to be delivered in less than 3 weeks. And we have competitors out there quoting 8, 10, and 12-week lead times. And, that's not going to fly. We live in, I call it the Amazon society, right? If I see it online, I expect it to be on the shelf and I want it tomorrow. Now, we try to push people, say, well, maybe 3 days, maybe you'll want it a little bit more if you have to wait 3 days, but it's not 12 weeks.
Okay.
So I think those are some of the kind of key differentiators for us, the speed of delivery, the expert knowledge, reliability, customization, ability to work with you and get you what you need. So.
All right, good deal. So is there anything else that the folks at home should know about PDUs or about Geist Global or anything else?
Well, I guess one other, we talked about the power strips, we talked about environmental monitoring. One thing that is really going well for us right now is a line of network switch cooling devices, network switch airflow management devices. So again, when we're talking to IT guys, a lot of guys in a big data centers now, the network switch that's in every cabinet ends up in the back of the cabinet.
Okay.
So it's essentially where all the heat's being exhausted from the servers, and it's sitting back there just choking in hot air. So we've developed a series of devices which are we call them network switch coolers, but they're essentially snorkels that channel cold air from the front of the cabinet back to where that network switch is. So that network switch can breathe cold air even though it's swimming in hot air. And they're a real problem solver. We've got models to fit almost every switch that's out there. So if anybody has a network switch overheating problem, let us know and we'll help you through that too.
Yeah, well, that sounds pretty cool. Then the final question, since you're president of Geist, a tech company, if you had an 18-year-old kid or nephew or such, and they wanted to get into like the IT type technology, where would you push them now? Like what would you tell them their focus should be?
You mean in terms of education or?
Just kind of like the whole career tree, like A+ was big until it wasn't, and MCSE now at least isn't what it used to be.
Yeah.
Like if somebody wanted to get into the tech field, where would you say that they should focus on? Where do you see the next 20 years?
Well, I mean, it's definitely more and more coding, right? I mean, if you look at the amount of people that we've hired in the last 15 years that are software coders and in all varieties. It's not just one particular language or one particular segment. I mean, we've got guys writing firmware, we got guys writing software. We need GUI interfaces. We need base firmware applications, C++, C++ stuff. So it's all over the board, but I don't think there's going to be enough programmers to go around in the world. The other side of it is when you look purely at facilities management, and again, this is whether you're a coder, if you're slanted that way, but if you're a wrench twister, there's going to be a lot of guys retiring out of this industry and keeping these facilities running, the chillers, the air conditioning systems, the big power and all that stuff. So there's a lot of room for I think there's a lot of opportunity in that as well in the next 15 to 20 years, just as you see this, all the baby boomers retiring, and there's a lot of that knowledge that goes clear back to the telco days. So when that kind of knowledge walks out the door, there's a big gap left behind.
That's interesting. So more like the HVAC and the facility stuff is where you think is valuable.
And it's a very specialized, it's a very specialized thing to have a 100% uptime type environment. It's a little different than your typical HVAC job, I guess.
Yeah.
Redundancy, knowledge of that, of keeping all that stuff up 24/7. So
Cool.
data center's going to get Christmas off.
Cool. Well, we've been talking for a while now, so thanks for being here with us today. It was interesting to learn about PDUs and a little bit more about Geist.
Well, thanks for the time. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Okay. So we'll stop the thing and stick around for a couple more seconds.
Okay.
So, yep, everybody at home, that was Geist again. Take a look at geistglobal.com if you're interested in PDUs and DCIM and environmental stuff. They have a few other things. FTC compliance. They are a sponsor of mine, just so you know. Doesn't really matter. I treat everybody about the same. But with that, I will see everybody else 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time tomorrow.